If I've gotten remarried, does Jesus see me as an adulterer? That's what he says. That's a little harsh, right? I'll be honest, this one's tricky, right? And there are going to be a lot of people who disagree with the answer to this question. But as I've studied and I've prayed over this text, I think the answer to this question, does Jesus see me as an adulterer if I've been divorced and been remarried? The answer, I believe, is not always. Let me flesh that out for you, okay? I believe that what Jesus is saying here has more to do with the permanence of marriage than it does with divorce. Jesus' opponents argued that marriage could be ended like a contract on a whim. It's like your cell phone plan. You want to switch? Go ahead. All right? Jesus argues that marriage is permanent because of the one flesh union that God literally makes husband and wife, not separate, but together. He does that. The divorce certificate that would have been issued, it relinquished the right of ownership to a person. Jesus argues that the piece of paper does not have effect on the permanence of a union joined by God. All right. In fact, the people standing there, if we were standing in that room, in that area as Jesus was teaching this, and our responses to what he said, emotionally, intellectually, would be similar to if Jesus were to show up here in person and begin to teach us that when you sell your car and that you buy a new one, that you're guilty of theft. Like, that's what this picture is saying. Now, are you actually guilty of theft for selling and buying a new car? No. So what is he saying? He's saying, I believe that our perspectives are wrong. That our human relationships may be defined by legal terms, but legal terms do not reflect the will of God. Here's how that plays out in real life. If you stand at the altar or city hall and you enter into a marriage with the perspective of, well, if this doesn't work out, that'll suck, but it'll just be good practice for my second marriage, that's adultery. If you enter into marriage with the perspective of, well, he's rich, so he'll make a great first husband, that's adultery. If you get engaged to somebody and you marry them with this idea that divorce is just no big deal, and if it doesn't work out, oh well, that is the same intention, that is the same spirit as adultery. But if you understand that the union that you're entering into is not a matter of convenience or is something that should be dissolved, but your spouse is unwilling to join you in God's will, and your spouse is unwilling to join you in his ways, and it ends in divorce, within those circumstances, I do not believe that what Jesus is saying is that you've committed adultery. So what is Jesus' response to us? And I think that really does depend on our perspective. Just like the perspectives of the people in the crowd, it'd be very different, right? We notice a pattern that Jesus actually speaks to the religious leaders and to his disciples in a very different way than he speaks to those that are outcast and downtrodden, that he is ministering to and healing and teaching, that there's a distinction being made. I believe that Jesus' response to us, if we are flippant with his will, is to just speak really clearly and bring some clarity that we're wrong. Malachi chapter 2:16 stands in opposition to the Jewish perspective that divorce is the will of God or can be approved in the will of God. Malachi 2:16 says God hates divorce. And there is something called the Yonatan Targum. That was a Jewish oral translation of the Old Testament prophets, of which Malachi is one. And within the Yonatan Targum, they translated God hates divorce as if you hate her, divorce her. Yes. Like, it's ridiculous. If you are being flippant with the will of God, Jesus' response to you is to come with great clarity and correct you and call you to change. Now, I think another important caveat here is that if you're single, you're thinking, I just got away with the whole morning. If you're single and you're dating, but you fail to understand that the process of dating within the context of being a follower of Jesus is actually to find the one to which you will make this commitment of covenant love. And the idea of making that commitment is absolutely ridiculous to you, stop dating. Because it's just one step down. And I know we're not married yet at that point, but I would argue that it's the same spirit as standing at the altar with the perspective, if this doesn't work out, shmeh, we'll give it another run. If you're in the room today and you say, I do have room to grow, that I do have sin that needs to be forgiven, and I acknowledge that sometimes my life is outside of the will of God. I think about the story of Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman at the well. And he asks her to give him a drink of water. And they begin to have this conversation. And he says, go and get your husband. And she says, I have no husband. He's like, you're right, you've got 5. She's an adulterer, right? She's living outside of the will of God. She is living in sin. And what is his response? He actually loves her, responds with graciousness and kindness, and they have this beautiful interaction in which she doesn't walk away with him like throwing shade at her, throwing rocks at her, feeling downtrodden or beaten up. She actually leaves that experience and says, I just met somebody who told me everything about who I am. He must be the Christ. And she brings people to Jesus. And I think about this distinction that if we're actually able to go and approach Jesus and the presence of God, and we would say, man, like there are things in my life where I know I'm falling short. Would you change me? Guys, there is hope. There is restoration. There is redemption for us and our relationships and even our marriages that need to be worked on.